Let's now take on an area that has a direct impact on every Pakistani who lives within the four walls of the country: agricultural reforms. Pakistan used to have strong agricultural division where we were producing enough or almost enough products that would satisfy the needs of the country. Of course, over the years, the needs of the country have exploded with the population rise, but our production capacity has not kept up, and as a result, Pakistan now is a net importer of produce. That obviously has a devastating impact on the production and on our dollar reserves. Clearly, all the manufacturing that Pakistan needs, if we're not able to do it within our own shores, we have to bring the goods from abroad. That means we have to pay for them through critical dollar resources that could have been spent in other areas that would have had an ROI in intangible form. Unfortunately, when you're paying for goods, consumable goods, then there is no, aside from the survival of the people that's obviously required, aside from that, there is no other ROI. Our dollars are much better spent if we could buy equipment or raw material or capabilities that we can put to use to make other goods and services that again we could sell abroad. So let's go back. Let's focus on the agricultural reforms that are critically needed in this country, and let's see where the opportunities are. So again, acknowledging the point that we used to be in a strong agricultural country, but now we are even importing grains. That's a challenge, a huge challenge. So the method of farming has changed dramatically in the last 25 years or so. Pakistan, unfortunately, has not modernized the processes, and that's where is a strong need for us to be able to do that. This lack of modernization is leading to an extreme food shortage and food insecurity. The stories that the media is reporting, people are running behind trucks that are giving out flour and rice. These are tragic stories because behind every person who's running, there's a family that needs these goods, and they're going hungry. The lack of food availability has a direct impact on not just the health of our people. There's a separate section where we'll be talking about our children, children's lack of resources and the stunted growth for our children, and what is the dramatic impact on the future of our country just because of our food insecurity. Again, we'll come to that, but here we're just trying to acknowledge what the challenges are in front of us. And as we said earlier, the last bullet point here, that this lack of food production internally forces us to use our foreign exchange reserves for something that we consume. Again, repeating the earlier point, that our money is best spent in importing something that we can put to work to produce some other goods and services. When you use your money to bring in something that gets consumed, there is no ROI aside from basic survival. So, solution: Pakistan must become self sufficient. Easier said, right? So let's see what are the possibilities. Let's look at some of our recommendations. Create an advisory group that works closely with all farmers and food producers and landowners and helps them with their logistical challenges. So again, we have heard stories, we have seen stories about these types of groups available. And again, people tend to look at these as a big brother, try to look over my shoulder, try to micromanage me. That is absolutely not the intent here. The intent here is for the farmers to welcome the phone call by these advisors who are just trying to either come over in person or speaking to them through some digital communication process on the tablet or on the phone, trying to understand what the pain points are and trying to figure out what can they do to solve them. For this group of individuals, obviously they work through a larger group. You have access to all the resources that the farmers would need to facilitate their day-to-day operation. Farmers should be able to focus their work, their energy on the critical items that they need, and the ancillary, the business ownership management aspect of their operation, that should be best handled by a larger group that advises them on what needs to be done. So provide low cost or no cost, strongly recommended, support to the farmers and to help with the logistical and overheads, just so they could, as we just said a moment ago, best focus on their core operations and create a strategy as to what we should be growing. Again, it's just because you've been growing wheat, or you've been growing a grain, or you've been growing rice, or you've been growing this particular food for the last 50 years, does not mean that you need to continue that. We need to look at the demands, the requirement. We need to look at all kinds of issues, even the amount of water needed and the water availability in the area, right? Because every crop has got different needs. We need to look at all the factors, the richness of the soil required for that kind of a product. This kind of an analysis must be performed by a body, by an academic group, even maybe working in partnership with the universities, and their recommendation should then be carried out by this group of individuals, advisors who are working closely with the farmers and maybe helping them with the transition and their planning. So create a strategy on what we should be growing and how it helps Pakistan, rather than continuing what these lands have produced for generations. Invest in heavy equipment. Promote regional cohorts that share this equipment. Again, not every farmer can afford to get the heavy equipment that they need, which will effectively facilitate some of the work that they need to do. And in the absence of that equipment, they need to provide manual labor to provide the same for the same end result. If you could make the equipment available maybe on a once a week basis, or maybe on some kind of a timeshare basis, you could facilitate the whole cohorts of farmers. So again, for this group to make those the stuff available that the farmers and the landowners would need for their effective operation. Develop, of course, expertise in soil analysis, figure out how to maximize the yield. So there are some crops which are year-round crops, some are seasonal crops. So what the land can produce, what the right weather would be, what the right opportunities would be, what the market needs, all those kinds of things we must take into account as we try to come up with our recommendations. Develop expertise in greenhouse for plants that would then benefit from it. And finally, promote the indoor farming and vertical farming and other soil-less farming techniques. There are a series of videos that we're making available for you. Please go ahead and take a look at those. Again, as we said a moment ago, agriculture has gone through massive changes, transformation, improvement, innovation, um, picture metaphor over the last couple of decades. We should be keeping up with the changing times. Again, given Pakistan's richness of the soil, the good access to weather, proximity to water, these are all excellent attributes that Pakistan must be able to utilize to the best of its capabilities. So again, coupling that with some of the best practices, some of the latest innovation that are available out there, it would greatly, substantially benefit what the country can do. So, continuing, how do we do this? Assign an advisor to every region who weekly visits every farm. These advisors are trained to assist farmers with any of their tasks and issues. Again, they are there, so they are the eyes and ears of this entire operation. They go to the farmer, they see what the challenges they are facing, whether it's insecticide, whether it's pesticides, whether it's a environmental hazard, or the crop availability, or the quality of seed, whatever it is that the farmers need. These are the people who first get to hear about the challenges, and through the larger organization, maybe through the economies of scale, they should be able to solve those problems and the challenges. So advisors who meet with the farmers on a weekly basis to hear about the issues and give them the solutions. And during the weekly visits, they assess the progress and identify the roadblocks and upcoming challenges. Support the official policy on the use of chemical based fertilizers and insecticides. As we have said a moment ago, the with the latest innovation, with the latest awareness over the last couple of decades, things that used to be the norm, the accepted practice, maybe back in the 70s, is no longer the accepted practice. We need to keep up with the changing times as well. So again, this group will help facilitate the migration from where they were to where they need to be. And these advisors report to a senior advisor. There's a whole management team hierarchy that have trained them and who are equipped in proposing solutions for the challenges which are being reported from the field. Again, the whole idea of these interactions is that we get to hear of the problems. We go back to the drawing board, figure out the solutions to those problems, and what's being reported by farmer A or farmer B will most likely pertain to several other farmers, other farmhouses as well. So again, the more informed we are at the central level, at the organizational level, the better we can benefit every field out there. And then these are highly productive meetings with the aim to solve problems. These are non-confrontational. So these are not about pointing finger. These are not about shirking from responsibility. That's about us being on the same side of the table, trying to understand what the challenges, what the problems are, and trying to come up with the right solutions. Every farmer, we must create an environment where every farmer looks forward to these interactions. If they have a question, they have a problem, there should be a number for them to contact this group and get the answers. Let's continue. So, what are the targets? What are the goals of this entire operation? For Pakistan to become self sufficient in all essential food crops. That's really a underlying requirement with this entire initiative, that for Pakistan to stop importing not only costs us in terms of our dollar exchange, it also puts us at mercy of our providers. If they have a shortage, or there's some geopolitical situations that we need to grapple with, or find workarounds with, that really hampers our availability. That puts our people in on the harm's way. So we need to, of course, we need to find ways to not do that and become self-sufficient ourselves. We need to find a way to minimize the wastages. Again, as there's no need to underline this anymore. Uh, a country that's going hungry, where a large percentage, large fraction of our population is going to bed hungry, we cannot afford to waste even a single grain. So let's try to figure out what is causing the wastages, what the challenges are, and what we can do collectively, as well as individually, to be able to stop that. Maximize the yield and productivity. We mentioned this earlier on, that farming techniques have changed substantially over the last couple of decades. Let's utilize the best practices, the latest techniques, and figure out the best practices and follow some of the best practices. And in the next couple of slides, we'll give you some examples, some case studies of what we could perhaps look at to gain some more insights. And then hopefully we reach a point where we produce enough to not just satisfy our own requirements, our own population's needs, but we can maybe take some of the excesses and start exporting the food or grain to other regional countries, and that will obviously allow us to earn some critical foreign exchange and make farming a profitable venture that'll further invite investments. It's a moonshot. M- This is again based not just anecdotally, but there's a harsh reality of how the last couple of generations have had to manage it. That the landowners the land is owned by the feudal lords, and they hire the farmers, or they work with the farmers to give out the land, and the farmers produce crops on the land, and then and then they share the profits with the landowners. The challenges have been that, given that the farmers have not been able to have the investment to keep up with the technology, with the changing time, the yield has been dropping over a period of time. So they're not producing enough. Or if there is an inclement weather one year, or floods, or other challenges, or maybe lack of rain, lack of moisture, lack of availability of water, if the crop does not do very well, it puts them in a hole in terms of being able to pay down the debt. And this effect mushrooms over a period of time. So we've all heard stories of how these farmers then become perpetually indebted to these landowners. It's a moonshot, right? Moonshot is something where we don't necessarily see the pathway to making it happen, but we'll put it out there. Could this be a goal of all of us combined together to get the farmers from out of the clutches of uh, these challenges, to get them the freedom to be able to take over the land and pay off the loans? I'll just leave it out there. So it's a huge challenge that we've been identifying, that the irrigation reforms have to meet all the objectives here. And then how do we best do it? Again, we could come up with our own practices, with our own best solutions. But here are two models that we could emulate. China, back in the 1960s, going through massive famine. Millions of people were dying all over the country, which really shook them to the core, that made them realize that for them to sustain their population at the country level, they needed to have come up with some substantial reforms. That was the reform that they came up with in the 1960s. 30 million people, by some estimates, had died just before they got to it. And from that point, in 30, between 30 and 35 years, obviously that's about just about the length of one generation, they produce enough to become almost food independent. So again, substantial jump. There are some case studies that we'll provide the link in the details below for you to take a look at that and see how they did that. Similar to that is also a case study of what we are providing below. It's in a place called Sikkim in northern India, northeast portion of India, where they became the first region in the world, in fact, that became 100% organic. Now, obviously, the throughput of an organic farm is much higher. The wastages are much lower, but the best point is that the prices are substantially higher than the non-organic goods that any other farm could provide. So they were able to make substantial investment into this area, but nearly 90 plus percent of the goods which they produce are sent abroad. The whole premise of this is that the goods are being absorbed by the international market, the organic goods, and they are paying obviously multiple of how much they would be paying for the same goods and serve goods if they were to produce it through the non-organic means. Again, whether Pakistan should imitate this model or not, that's not the recommendation. The point, but the point being, as the point that we may be making throughout the series of presentations, the problems that we are solving today, that we are looking at today, they have been faced by other entities as well, and they try to solve the problems. What can Pakistan do? We could reinvent the wheel, try to come up with a whole new set of solutions, or we could try to see how others have handled them, and then we could maybe take some of the pages from their playbooks and imitate some of their models. Not everything necessarily we should copy exactly as is. We should obviously put our own filters, our own context on top of that. But these are some successful models with the agriculture realm that have been adopted by countries, and we're just sort of bringing them to your attention here. All right, let's continue with this journey.